Ellen M. Granberg. Please join me in welcoming Provost and Executive Vice President for Academic Affairs, Christopher Allen Bracey.
Good afternoon, everyone. As you are aware, in light of ongoing global tensions and their impact on our community, the university has modified this week's scheduled celebration for the installation of President Granberg in an effort to focus our support on our community. However, we are delighted to move forward with this very special event and welcome you all this afternoon, whether you are in person or joining us via live stream. I would like to acknowledge our distinguished guests, current emeriti and former trustees, former presidents, deans, vice presidents, former vice presidents, and provosts for research, university professors, members of the national academies, and delegates. And I'm especially pleased to welcome the George Washington University's renowned faculty who work here and we celebrate today. Across disciplines, institutes, schools, GW faculty create impact through teaching, innovation, scholarship, and research. Indeed, for over 200 years, our faculty have delivered individual and collective excellence in hospitals, laboratories, neighborhoods, museum galleries, the halls of Congress, and communities across the globe. The display of books that you passed at the entrance to this auditorium is a sampling of the immense breadth of publications authored by our faculty just in the last few years. President Granberg is a passionate advocate for GW's academic research and clinical enterprises. In fact, one of the first things she suggested for her inauguration was holding this very event to celebrate our faculty and express gratitude for the decades of achievement and dedication of our faculty. And I'm thrilled that we are fulfilling that request today with the first event of her inauguration. Now, please join me in welcoming the 19th president of the George Washington University, Dr. Ellen Granberg.
Well, hello everyone and good afternoon. And thank you all so much for taking time out of your very busy schedules to be here. As the provost mentioned, I wanted an acknowledgement of our incredible faculty to be a cornerstone of this inauguration celebration. And that's why it's such a pleasure to join you here today to recognize the GW faculty and their remarkable legacy of research, education, patient care, and service at GW. Our commitment to academic excellence was one of the primary things that drew me here, and I am truly honored to be a part of a community with such a remarkable history of impact throughout our world. When I became president, a colleague of mine gave me some advice. He said, as you plan for the future, look for your university's unfair advantages. And as I have gotten to know GW a little better, as I engage with our community, as I think about the future of the university, this idea of unfair advantages has been with me this entire time. And I think I'm starting to see what those unfair advantages are. And our incredible faculty, many of whom are here today, produce some of the highest levels of research in all of higher education, something we are extremely proud of. And in fact, we've been an R1 institution since 2011, a designation given to the most productive 146 research universities in the nation. But thanks to our unique location in the heart of the nation's capital, we're not a place that produces scholarship for the sake of citations and journal publications, although those are very, very nice. We do publish, of course, and in fact, we publish at a rate that far exceeds many of our peer institutions. But as the largest university in the heart of Washington, D.C., GW is a magnet for people who want to make a difference in their world and in their communities. And that, I think, is one of our unfair advantages. It's true for our student body, for our staff, and for our faculty. The GW community is drawn to our campuses because they know their ideas, discoveries, and innovations foundations will be created alongside the national and international expertise and resources needed to have a real and immediate influence on the world around us. And because of this, our faculty have a unique opportunity to extend their scholarship to application in education, policy, law, administration, patient care, and beyond. Because of this, our students have unparalleled exposure to the practical experience of making change. Because of this, GW continues to have an outsized impact on our country and our world. It's because of this dual dedication to excellence and impact, extended over many years, that unfair advantage I was talking about, that GW was invited to join the Association of American Universities this year. Membership in the AAU is not just the gold standard in higher education, it is the platinum standard. It signifies the highest levels of excellence among research universities and places GW publicly and formally among the best universities in North America. This is a validation of the groundbreaking work happening every day across GW's campuses. So today, I want to express my sincerest gratitude to our many faculty whose work on our campuses and in communities around the globe have continued to lay this foundation of excellence. I also want to acknowledge our graduate students and postdocs who continue to make significant contributions to scholarship and clinical care while they are growing their professional and intellectual skills at GW. And finally, I want to thank the many people who support our faculty by managing operations, laboratories, budgets, facilities, and all of the other elements that are required for a world-class research enterprise. These staff members are often the unsung heroes of academic excellence, and today we also celebrate their hard work and dedication. GW is a remarkable institution, and as you will see in just a moment, we have so much to be proud of. The theme for our inaugural celebration this week is Raise Higher Together. We've achieved so much, but I really believe there's much more potential across our campuses. There is much more need in the wider world, and our best days are still ahead. As the 19th president, I want to work with all of you to be a catalyst for that potential. I want to remove barriers to collaboration, provide the resources and infrastructure needed for breakthroughs, and advance the impact of scholarship at GW for years to come. I believe that together we can raise higher. Thank you all for your belief in GW and our shared future. Your work is the engine for our excellence. I'm deeply grateful for your professional skill and your dedication. Thank you everyone for joining us, and I look forward to participating in this event with all of you. Thank you.
The George Washington University is a community of scholars and changemakers whose core ambitions to create knowledge that matters and to train the next generation of leaders has driven our university for 200 years. At GW, we never stop learning, questioning, and discovering. Our culture supports dreamers, explorers, and risk-takers. Our people are pioneers. GW faculty are recognized leaders in their fields across a stunning breadth of disciplines. Their highly cited work is published in top journals, earns prizes, and the enduring respect of their peers. They are dedicated educators, many of whom bring broad, practical, real-world experience directly into our classrooms. Our talented students arrive at GW from nearly every continent with a drive to change the world. And they, along with our postdoctoral researchers, contribute to groundbreaking discoveries as they forge their own futures. Our dedicated staff committed to GW's mission fuel the operation of our academic, research, and clinical enterprises. GW's work spans the globe, and our expertise shapes important conversations. But more than anything, GW is ambitious, and we are known for our relentless pursuit of impact. And the world is noticing. In 2023, the Association of American Universities invited GW to join AAU's coalition of the nation's leading research universities. a distinction every great university seeks, and a significant recognition of GW's excellence in research, teaching, and innovation. GW is a launching pad, a location in the nation's capital without parallel and with unlimited opportunity. Where GW has a seat at the table, informing decision makers and the laws and policies that shape society and our future. Where our international affairs experts contribute to the public debate on global issues, teaching and conducting research steps away from international and non-governmental organizations. Where we are a go-to resource for executive education and professional development for emerging leaders in government and business. Since our founding, GW scholars and students have worked and innovated alongside world-class institutions, influential organizations, and federal agencies. At GW, our scholars forge history in real time. Excavating sunken slave ships on the ocean floor or ancient wine cellars in the Near East to reveal the forgotten narratives of our past. Closely observing cosmic phenomena in deep space to untangle the mysteries of the universe. Our scholars are advancing technological innovations and strengthening the STEM workforce to keep America globally competitive. Our schools and museums partner with the nation's most prestigious art institutions to facilitate immersive learning, thought-provoking works of art, and interdisciplinary research. At GW, we support a dynamic, open environment of inquiry and nurture that first spark of an idea. Bold, new creative endeavors to express ourselves, challenge systems, and explore our humanity. We share our ideas, questions, and theories, publishing scholarship at an aggressive pace. And we adapt and develop those ideas and inventions into viable ventures and technologies ready for the real world. Moreover, we teach the next generation to seek the spark of innovation in themselves and to nurture it. We learn from our local communities, exploring the ways that research and action can advance equity. We see proof of excellence in our alumni. They are bold leaders on the international stage, and they are quiet servants in the neighborhoods where they live and work. Their impact is their legacy, and ours as well. Teams of GW scholars and students collaborate with partners around the world to probe the leading questions of our time. Understanding the impacts of climate change in the Arctic and partnering with policymakers and local experts to make communities more resilient. Leading a national effort to build trust in systems driven by artificial intelligence. Designing better diagnostics to quickly detect diseases, giving clinicians a powerful tool to fight future pandemics. Or developing cutting-edge treatments for diseases that have long evaded a cure. Analyzing and mapping air quality data collected by NASA satellites that ultimately guide clean air initiatives on the ground. Advancing evidence-based programs that protect women and girls around the world from gender-based violence. And racing to battle a global pandemic by answering the call to develop life-saving vaccines. These and other groundbreaking efforts are made possible by support from federal agencies, generous donors, and private foundations that believe in our ability to solve complex problems. We are a community at the forefront of knowledge creation, forging a better future. And as long as we remain curious, engaged, compassionate, and inspired to use our gifts to build a greater world, the George Washington University will continue to raise higher together.
So our success is made possible by impressive and renowned faculty expertise and strong leadership within the research enterprise. And I'm pleased to present to you several preeminent scholars from the George Washington University community who are eager to share their thoughts on GW and its scholarly impact. They are just a few of the countless individuals in this community whose work elevates this distinguished community. Participating on today's panel, please welcome Mary Ellsberg, Founding Director of the Global Women's Institute and Professor of Global Health. Alexa Alice Jobin, founding co-director of the Digital Humanities Institute and professor of English, Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies, Theater, International Affairs, and East Asian Languages and Literature. Chet Sherwood, director of the National Chimpanzee Brain Resource and professor of anthropology. Ekundayo Shitu, chair and associate professor of engineering management and systems engineering department. And our moderator for today's discussion, Pamela Norris, vice provost of research and professor of mechanical and aerospace engineering.
Hello, thank you for being here. It's a pleasure to welcome those of you in the room this afternoon, and we're glad those of you are joining us on live stream as well. Thank you, President Granberg, for offering us this opportunity to celebrate academic excellence as part of the inauguration events. I want to thank our panelists. Each of you represent excellence in many ways, be that your scholarship, your impact on the scholarly community at GW, your advancement of our students, and for your impact on the world. Many of you in the room today have chosen your work because you're driven to address complex challenges, those that are facing our world. This event is both a celebration of that commitment and an acknowledgement of how imperative it is that rigorous scholarship flourish, especially among times of global strife. Our hope today is to highlight some of the innovative work happening at GW and to have a discussion of what factors have contributed to academic excellence at our university. As a VPR, I'm always looking for ways to make GW scholarship and its impact more visible, and I'm delighted to be having this conversation. So let's begin by getting a sense for our audience. How many people here, if you could show by a show of hands, are engaged in or support research in the arts, humanities, and social sciences? All right. How about those engaged in a STEM field? Okay, how about medicine and public health? All right, and business, law, international affairs. And I hope this is the biggest category. How many of you say you work across disciplines and across colleges at GW? Excellent. That was a lot of shows of hands there. There you go. So let's begin by learning a little bit about our panelists. I'd like to ask each of you to just give us a brief sense of your work. Mary, if you'll get us started.
Sure. Well, thank you very much for having me today. It's really a great honor. My path to academia was pretty non-traditional. Right after college, I spent the next 20 years living in Nicaragua, working in community health programs, and also as a women's rights activist. And I sort of stumbled onto research and epidemiology because in the mid-90s, the women's movement was trying to get a law passed on domestic violence, which at the time nobody really thought was a very big issue. Nobody was talking about it internationally or locally. And we were told that we needed hard numbers, we needed evidence to show that it was a real problem before politicians would take it seriously. And I thought, evidence, that sounds interesting. And I ended up going to graduate school in Sweden, and I did the first, as my doctoral research, the first prevalence study on domestic violence in Nicaragua, where we found out that 50% of all the women we interviewed had been physically or sexually abused by a partner in their lives. And used really skillfully by the women's movement, all this information, it created just a huge groundswell of support for the law, and we got the law passed. So that was sort of the beginning for me. In the last 30 years, I've really spent working in the same field of trying to understand both the causes and drivers of violence against women and gender inequality, but also trying to understand what we can do to end it. The last piece is that 10 years ago, I had the incredible fortune of being selected as the founding director of the Global Women's Institute at George Washington, which was the vision of then President Stephen Knapp, and really lovely to see you here. We owe so much to your vision. And over the last 10 years, we've gone from being basically 2 people, myself and an assistant, to a staff of 15, over 50 affiliated faculty, and we see ourselves now as one of the preeminent centers in the study of violence and gender inequality.
Excellent. Thank you, Mary. Alexa.
So my work analyzes the power of embodied words and stories. I believe that great stories are strangers at home. They give you something, they make the quotidian strange, but you can still recognize it because these great stories come back to us in a new language, but it is somehow recognizable. So I put this particularly in the context of the study of race and gender, with a strong focus on film and theater and performance culture globally. And when I got to GW, I realized GW is really uniquely poised to encourage innovation in civil society. And so with OVPR support, I started a new field that is now known as Global Shakespeare. And basically, we studied a wide variety of different performances, how they change race and gender when they perform this canon in different languages in wildly different styles. I was able to found a major project. It's MIT and GW joint venture called Global Shakespeare, which provides free access to videos from all over the world, many of which are subtitled. And today, this remains one of the biggest and open access and peer-reviewed resource for underprivileged students. Anyone with internet connection will be able to expand their knowledge through a concrete case of Shakespeare, but it's really about cultural exchange, promoting storytelling and mutual understanding through cultural exchange. And thanks to new knowledge from this field, we now know, for example, Othello was a white man. And many of the gender crossing, the cross-gender roles that are actually transgender characters, among many other things. And so words indeed can change the world. And that's the vision when I co-founded the GW Digital Humanities Institute, to look into the digital realm. How do digital artifacts relate to our society? So when generative AI emerged last fall, I applied performance theories to analyze AI as a mirror image of our society and as a kind of theatrical performance. So now I encourage my students to use AI as a social collaboration tool to enhance social justice, rather than as a shortcut, as commonly misconceived. So AI is really important in changing how we think about words, actually, right? What's the meaning of writing? So I wanted to come back to storytelling. I think the kind of stories we tell, with or without AI, with theater, really shows our desires. And storytelling makes us human. I want to leave with some open-ended questions, questions that we often think about in the type of research I do. For example, in what new ways are the classics relevant, right? How do we deal with unpleasant stories? Are they still useful in some ways? And how do we think about race and gender in these difficult times? Many stories are not just about numbers, but it's about words.
Thank you, Alexa. Chad.
Yes, well, it's really terrific to be part of this event to help celebrate the inauguration of President Granberg. In introducing myself, I think I want to emphasize the significance of interdisciplinary research. That's because I try to combine in my own work anthropology and neuroscience. What that means is we, in our lab, do studies of how human brains compare with those of our primate cousins, especially the great apes, so chimpanzees, bonobos, gorillas, and orangutans. And what we're trying to understand is seek answers to questions about what is different about the human brain that enables abilities, like the ability for language, greater empathy and cooperation with one another, and our capacity for culture. So we're trying to ask questions about what is it in the human brain that is so plastic and open to behavioral flexibility that enables learning, so that culminates in achievements like the International Space Station and the game of baseball. Also, what is different about the human brain that makes us especially vulnerable to certain diseases, especially those of aging and neurodegeneration? So these are some of the kinds of questions we tried to address in the lab. I wasn't always headed for a career in science. And in fact, in my early days in college in New York City, I was much more interested in music and literature. And I didn't stumble upon anthropology until later in my university years. And that really emphasizes for me the importance of combining research and education to be able to help young minds broaden their horizons and to maybe imagine possibilities that they haven't encountered yet before. And so that's something that I try and do in both my research and in my teaching, is to bring that sort of inspiration to students as well. I'm really lucky at GW to be part of dynamic interdisciplinary communities. So in the anthropology department that I'm part of, I'm surrounded by people who have specialties in linguistics, in cultural change, in governance, in social movements. In my part being in the Center for the Advanced Study of Human Paleobiology, I'm around specialists in archaeology, paleontology, primatology, all with a shared interest in trying to understand human origins. And in the Mind-Brain Institute at GW, I'm part of the broader neuroscience community. And I think part of what attracts me and all of the wonderful postdocs, graduate students, research staff that I get to work with here at GW is this ability to do meaningful work that can have a bigger societal impact. So I'm very interested to continue this interdisciplinary conversation today.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the organizers of this event for finding me worthy to be here. I'm super excited to be here. So my area of research is, I look at global climate change. When you look at climate change, it's actually a very classic example of what we call the tragedy of the commons. Climate change, everybody thinks it belongs to us, the environment, the atmosphere. But then, who owns it? Nobody owns it. And when you look at the tragedy of the commons, it's a case of where self-interest predominates what activities that people partake in. So when you look at the problem of climate change as a classic problem of the tragedy of the commons, it's an area that I'm excited and I've been studying for quite some time. Specifically, you can tell climate change is nebulous. It's such a wide area. But I've focused on investment decisions in energy technologies, because we've seen that the pattern of consumption we have with respect to electricity, with respect to the emissions that come with the production of electricity, are adding significantly to the incidences of climate change as we're seeing today. Now, why investment? Why is that key? Well, investment would have been easy if there were no uncertainties in the technologies that we're invested in. First and foremost, those technologies, we don't even know about their performance in terms of how well they are going to rescue some of these emissions or some of these incidences, causes of the incidences of climate change. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, when you look at the policies that are being enacted, we just passed last year the Inflation Reduction Act that has almost $1 trillion for climate change solutions. When you look at policies, the question many investors are asking is, how long will these policies last that will allow my investment in this research and development, in this new technology, to last long enough for me to recoup my investments that I've made into these technologies. So again, decision-making under uncertainty, especially when you have multiple technology alternatives, becomes really important. And believe it or not, these are the problems that firms, individuals, you and I, were facing on a daily basis. Should I keep consuming electricity from my local utility, or should I take advantage of retrofitting my rooftop with solar panels? Now, those are decisions we have to make. In the face of competing alternatives, I help to make that decision-making easier. What do I use? I use established theoretical frameworks in the academia. We have what we call the resource-based view, which looks internally at the firm's capability, their competitive advantages. How can they hone in on that in making some of these decisions? I look at the use of transaction cost economics. Firms do not exist in isolation. They exist in the marketplace. How do they compete? How do they transact in a way that minimizes the cost of those transactions, in a way that brings the bottom line home? Believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, the climate change problem is real, and it is an economic issue. For as long as we are trying to address this issue, we should also make sure that we're making the economics work. If it doesn't work, nobody's going to do it. Now, one area of my research as well, when I bring it home to the local, consumer level, is we're looking at low and middle income families. We're asking the question, how do we advance these clean technologies to these families as well? When you talk about solar panels, the only areas where you find solar panels are areas for the rich, those who have their own rooftops. But guess what? A majority of the population actually live in multifamily complexes. How do we develop community solar projects such that these families can also take advantage of this technology? These are the pressing issues. And again, like I said earlier, there are issues that are difficult to address because of the uncertainties that border around the decisions that are to be made. If you allow me, I won't keep quiet, so let me keep quiet on this point.
Okay, so many of us in our discussions, we have really talked about the advantage of the location of GW. Our proximity really offers us an advantage. Those of you in the audience, how many of you feel you have leveraged our proximity to advance your research? I don't see a lot of hands going up yet. Alexa, can you speak to this and how you have leveraged proximity?
Well, by proximity, we meant the proximity to excellent people who are eager for change, but also proximity to institutions. One of the most renowned, of course, is the Smithsonian, but slightly lesser known is the famous Folger Library on Capitol Hill, across from Supreme Court and Library of Congress. It is partly a history of the founding of the early Americas in what we now call the thinking of the empire, right? An empire always needs books, maybe if it's counterintuitive, but you can see Library of Congress is actually one of the very top resources in the world. And that next to the Supreme Court, and Mr. Folger decided to build his library dedicated to Shakespeare, but also Renaissance culture right there. Today, it has a lively theater as well, which performs Shakespeare's works but also mixed with contemporary new plays. And this is an incredible resource. The first folio containing a majority of Shakespeare's works, published shortly after his death. Each folio is unique, and the Folger Library has the largest number of these folios in the world, far more than, say, Stratford-upon-Avon, his birthplace, or England. And so scholars around the world, they tend to come here as the epicenter of not only Shakespeare studies, but pre-modern cultural studies. So I've had in my various capacities, had various collaborations with this institution, brought my students there, not to mention taking advantage of the theatrical enterprise. Not far from the Folger, of course, it's also the Capitol, where I had the good fortune of doing a congressional testimony to talk about the importance of the humanities in an era of globalization, where I shared my thoughts and experiences in not just teaching stories, but creating stories, allowing students to have their stories, right? If stories are strangers at home, like I said, but without our own stories, we would not have a home, right? You would not have a place where you can call home intellectually, emotionally, and so it's very important. It's not really about fiction has the power to ignite imagination. And I was really pleased to be able to advocate on behalf of not only GW, but the importance of humanistic disciplines and interpretive social sciences to urge the Congress to continue to set aside resources to support these very important endeavors, to truly have a deep and balanced and understanding of the world beyond numbers. A lot of times policy making perhaps got distracted into a numbers game, right? And you would lose sight of the true humanity behind it, the full story. So quantitative and qualitative, I believe quantitative and qualitative disciplines really have to come together. And
Chad, would you like to add to that about proximity and how it's been leveraged in your research?
Sure. I think I want to take a chance to extend that a little bit, not just to the benefit of proximity in my own research, but in graduate education, undergraduate education, and opportunities. And what I've been able to witness as being really transformative because of the distinctive, I mean, it sounds like a cliche at this point, to talk about this distinctive privilege of GW in the nation's capital, but I can share with you what I've seen happen. So we have a graduate program in human paleobiology, and students come to study human evolution and primate biology, and they might be doing a project about the detailed skeletal anatomy and the bumps and grooves of various species, or they may be studying chimpanzee brains in my lab and so on. But because of GW's location, its very close connections with the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History, and opportunities to get involved with policy and educational outreach, we see our students becoming more and more interested in that sort of engagement. So a student who might come in to study bones, by the time they've completed their program at GW, we've seen them go on to all sorts of amazing new paths in their careers. So we have graduates from the human paleobiology program who are in the Department of Energy, who are at the EPA, who are working at the White House in the Office of Science and Technology Policy. And so I think that that's the kind of thing that happens here that I wouldn't imagine really happening elsewhere. And it's really wonderful to see.
Excellent. So we know universities have an advantage of being a convener of communities, and certainly we have lots of convenings at GW. When we do that, we offer people a seat at the table. We offer access to people. We can also exclude people when we do that. Mary, can you talk about this with your research and what that means to you?
Absolutely. I completely concur with what others have said about, and what was said in the video earlier, that we get a seat at the table by being so close. Of course, we are able to input into the White House Commission on Gender Equality. We've been able to support the recent National Action Plan on Gender-Based Violence, but it also does allow us to bring others to the table, and that's something that we've tried to do through our research and our practice. Many of you were here. I recognize you from our 10th anniversary celebration, which was just a few months ago, and you'll remember that we had 33 ex-prisoners, Nicaraguan women who had been imprisoned for their political beliefs and activism, some of them for over 2 years in solitary confinement. And just by coincidence, they had been released about a month before our 10th anniversary, and we'd been very involved in the campaign to release them. We were able to invite them to our 10th anniversary, use that as an opportunity to uplift the story of women human rights defenders around Latin America. And the result was probably here, people got to learn a little bit more about Nicaragua, and that was important. But I can assure you that in the Nicaraguan diaspora around the world, the thousands of people who are now in exile and in Nicaragua itself, it made a big difference to see that these women who had been completely silenced and nobody knew about them for years were here in Washington, D.C. being honored, and it got an incredible amount of publicity, and it was so meaningful to those women, to their families, and to the entire human rights movement. So I think those are very unique opportunities that we get also by being in this space.
Io, what might you add?
I'll precede my response to this particular question by what the Dean of the School of Engineering, who actually is in the room, came in with when he started on the job. He said, engineering and ellipsis, 3 dots, meaning fill up the space. After a year or two, some people said, why should it be started by engineering and? Why can't it be anything else and engineering? He said, you know what? Make it the 3 ellipses and engineering. And today, we're talking about engineering and public policy, engineering and nursing, engineering and homelessness. I'm sure you'll be wondering, what has engineering got to do with homelessness? I'm going to give a shout out to 2 of my colleagues at this point, Dr. Tiffany Sikorsky in the School of Education and Dr. Erica Wortham. We sat together to write a proposal to the NSF to fund a way by which we can increase the engagement of engineering students in their discipline, in their studies. And what did we do? We came up with the idea of social innovation. Social innovation for engineering students. And the NSF loved it. They said, yes. Now, where am I going with this story? We started the project. We created 2 courses. One was the theory of social innovation. If you follow Stanford regularly, they have a publication they actually call Social Innovation. It's a monthly publication or maybe quarterly publication. We used that publication, articles in that publication, as the theoretical framework for social innovation in the first segment of the class. Then the students come back a year later to actually implement a real service learning opportunity. And the last one they executed was looking at the problem of homelessness in the society. If you look around our community here, you're going to see pockets of this, self-made shelters coming up in different places. And we said, how can we use our engineering knowledge to address this societal challenge? So we brought in students from computer science, mechanical and aerospace engineering, systems engineering, and to a large extent, this group of students came together and we extended a hand of fellowship to non-traditional players in the academic sector. We're talking about going to Charlie's Place, talking to people there. How did you end up here? What are the conditions that drove you to this situation? Because the misconception many people had, or at least people even today have, is, oh, homelessness was due to maybe some addiction or some dereliction or what have you. But we realized that many of those that go to this place for their breakfast, lunch, and dinner in some cases are actually people of strong acumen, mental stability. And it's just a transitioning period for some of them. So we started looking inwards. What can we do? Can we develop showering stations across the DC metropolis? Can we use our optimization modeling skills to identify where those showering stations would be? And we had speakers come from these shelters, come to speak to the students in the class. I can go on and on about the value of location. It is invaluable. The English language is an interesting language. When something is of immense value, we say it is invaluable. And I can tell you, as someone who was initially resident in New Orleans, I came from Tulane University to DC, and I see the immense opportunities that this location offers. Last week, I was in Doha on behalf of the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine on one of their Frontier series. We had 44 Americans that were invited, all made it to Doha in this symposium. Why am I telling this story? We projected the image of GW, and many people reached. The number of cards I came back with outpasses the number I went out with. The point I'm trying to make is we have a significant opportunity here. And I'm so excited to hear across the panel that we're actually taking advantage of those opportunities. Again, if you allow me, lots of stories, but I'll stop with that.
So I'm going to build on what you were saying, Dio. You talked about the importance of really pushing limits and taking risk, because we know that's where innovation occurs. How many of you in the audience would say that you feel supported in taking risk in your work at GW? Hard to see up here, but I see not as many hands as I would want this time. We're going to work on that. So Chet, can you talk about how your research has benefited from risk-taking? Maybe even what evolutionary biology tells us about risk-taking.
I think that in my own research, what I've been able to do to mitigate risk in attempting innovative approaches has really depended on collaboration, team building, acknowledging what I can do, and then where we can bring in others, trainees, collaborators from elsewhere, building international networks and so on, to be able to do more than we would ever be able to do on our own. That's an incredibly important piece, I think, of handling risk and research. Another really important piece is to have a solid foundation of research infrastructure where you're working. And so for me, what that means is I'm very dependent on core facilities at GW. In particular, the Nanofabrication and Imaging Center and the GW Genomics Core Facility. And to know that I can get expertise from them, that they are a stable form of support to be able to undertake maybe some approaches I know I need help with and my trainees need help with, is absolutely, absolutely essential. I think that those are critical elements in being able to undertake risks in research.
And how about what biology tells us about how our brains evolve in accepting risks and learning from culture?
Oh, well, I mean, I think that our brains are certainly always managing risk and trying to navigate opportunity. That comes not only from human evolution, but from our deep ancestry. All animals have to do this. And so, part of my own research is informed by seeing those continuities that we share with other animals.
Yeah. It's fascinating. How has the ability to adapt to evolving culture manifested itself in your work, Alexa?
Yes, I see risk as opportunities. The Chinese characters, the phrase for risk, in fact, encompasses both risk and opportunity. And there's no way to say one without the other, which I think is very accurate. And globally, we do see some cultures being more risk averse, right? Wanting to be safe, and in some narratives, that is the story of Japan's rise and fall in global economics in terms of innovation. American culture tends to label itself as being more innovative, kind of boldly, going where no one has gone before. It is partly true, but we also need to look at, increasingly looking at failures, which is really important. Failures are data points themselves. It's not necessarily to how do I then overcome this? Where the infrastructure of the society has failed gender minorities, LGBT communities. And that types of failures are an important part of the history of evolution to be recorded, but also to offer lessons as we collectively move forward. And so stories need to be told, not just about successes, but failures, not in the cliched sense of kind of failures will eventually lead to success, as teachers like to tell them. And so risks is very much part of that story, right? And without critical analysis of all of this, we wouldn't be able to move forward. One of my current projects involves women, academia, and failure in quotation mark. So it has to do with academic infrastructure, what we can do better, sense of belonging. A lot of times women academics feel that they neither belong nor not belong. It's in a between place, and we need to identify beyond numbers, exactly what kind of narratives are contributing to these kind of sense of exclusion. And so to allow those stories to emerge, they don't emerge often enough, I think. In academic innovation, we are here to celebrate excellence, right? But behind this moment, there are so many trials and errors. And so the last point I'm going to make about risk is I feel that generally speaking, at this particular university, there is support for kind of risk-taking. You have to try something out, right? And for my discipline, interpretive disciplines, that means time. You need time. You don't need big labs like you, but you need time for the ideas to ruminate, to mature. You need to perhaps try it out. Maybe due to gatekeeping, you won't be able to make it into big conferences because it's too outrageous. You have to try at smaller venues. So time and resources. If we talk about conferences, that would be financial resources to be able to do that and to do what, 5 years? Do you have 5 years? Or is the tenure clock counting down? So generally, there tend to be more innovation after tenure with the security. People begin to be able to try out really, really innovative ideas, things that the field perhaps would not accept. I also want to mention failures and risks. It's very time-bound, right? In a particular time period or culture, they would say that idea would never fly. That doesn't. But another culture, another time, they say, oh my God, that is innovative. Let's go to the moon. So that's very culturally, historically specific. What is labeled as risk or failure?
So we've had many discussions already, and you've highlighted this, some of you, about the importance of interdisciplinary work and how it has shaped your own research. I want to know what has made it possible for you to reach across disciplines at GW, what's influenced your work, and maybe what we need to do better to encourage doing that more. Would you like to start, Mary?
Sure. When I first came to GW 10 years ago, I came from the nonprofit world where you tend to be, the expertise in a specific organization, whether it be research on women or on appropriate health, it tends to be fairly narrow, and you don't have these opportunities to look for, kind of wild connections and creativity. And the first week I found here, like an example of the amazing breadth and depth of expertise that we have here that makes it possible. I don't know if he's here today, but we were very interested in looking at violence against women and poverty and how women's economic empowerment might be connected to reducing violence. And talking to some colleagues, I found out, colleagues actually in Latin America, they said, can you put us in touch with James Foster, who many of you know from the Elliott School, professor of economics, who is the person who created the multidimensional index of poverty, which is used throughout the world now as a gold standard. I called him up. Turns out his office is a block away. He came straight over, and we started cooking up ideas of how to include the multidimensional poverty index in our research. Another example is Professor Leslie Jacobson, who is beloved here at the university, recently retired, professor of theater and dance. She came to me within a month of arriving and said, I want to do something around theater, dance, and gender. And we developed together something that we called the the Arts and Gender Justice Initiative that went on for the years that she was here. And we put on plays, we did all recitals of stories of women activists internationally and in the United States that were just amazing. And then a final one, seeing also that Dean Goldman and Matthew are here, who have been incredible allies to us and are members of our leadership council. Professor Rosa Celorio, who is an expert in gender and human rights in law in Latin America, has been such a great ally to us that we have actually together presented a case before the Inter-American Human Rights Court that won against the government of Bolivia for their mistreatment of sexual abuse victims. So it's this kind of ability to do research and action and new issues that I had never thought of before, and really came out of the enthusiasm of the faculty here. And just to say, I said before, we have 50 affiliated faculty from every single one of the schools of the university, and each one of them comes with some amazing, interesting kind of connection to our work.
It's exciting, very exciting. Is there any words of encouragement you'd like to give for people to?
I actually want to add to the point about interdisciplinarity here at GW. We have a lot of resources, and I believe I'm preaching to the choir here, in terms of, for example, we have the Cross-Disciplinary Research Fund. One of the stipulations, which is an internal funding mechanism here at GW, one of the stipulations behind receiving that award is that you are working across the aisle. In other words, your collaborators shouldn't be from your department or even from your school. They've got to be from across the street. So that is a strong mechanism for promoting interdisciplinary work, collaboration. That's number one. Number two, the National Science Foundation, out there just 5 metro stops away, always push that for you to actually break the glass ceiling, you have to be ready to make impact. Dr. Pam Norris, the very first time I met with Dr. Pam Norris in my office, because she was doing this exploratory visit with faculty members, and I went ahead to talk about my research, how the intellectual merit is sound. Dr. Norris said, so Dio, this is all great. Optimization, stochastic optimization, decision-making, robust decision. Who cares? What's the impact? Okay, and that was exactly it. She said, who cares? And at that point, I scratched my head. I said, yeah, that's true. Who cares? And I think to a large extent, when you want to break those glass ceiling, you want to make innovation come alive, you really have to think about collaborating across the aisle. Who's going to use this? What are the benefits? What are the unintended consequences of what we're trying to develop? Because it's very easy for us as scientists to just sit in our narrow silos, in our chambers, thinking we're advancing knowledge. But then at the end of the day, they sit on the shelf. Research is no longer about sitting on the shelf. It's about changing lives. It's about changing living conditions. It's about extending livelihood. It's about extending possibilities and opportunities to the haves and the have-nots. That's one of the values, again, that we find here at GW. In terms of the resources internally, tremendous resources. And in terms of the drive for impact, your work must be impactful. Yes, the science should be great, but what's the impact? Those are the values I see to the question you asked about interdisciplinarity.
Do you want to?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes. I think he can answer the question, who cares now? And I know the answer. Go ahead, Chad.
And if I can add to that, I mean, I think that I agree with everything that's been said, and I think that to propel even more interdisciplinarity, structured events like symposia are excellent. Engineering solutions like buildings, the Science Engineering Hall itself is excellent, and it, in my own experience, moving in there has brought me into contact much more with the biologists on my hall, the chemists a couple floors down. It's been absolutely terrific in that way. But I also think that unstructured, informal opportunities to just socialize together are really, really important. So those conversations, those natural conversations can occur. People can speak in an accessible way with no pressure. And I think that can build really important, innovative, interdisciplinary collaborations. I'd love to see even more opportunities for that. And then something else that I think can be a real benefit is opportunity for more team teaching. And I know that there are some barriers to that, which I would love to see those fall away so that more team teaching can occur, which I think will also promote more interdisciplinarity.
I concur. I think in each corner we have, all our strange conventions and rules, and that make this kind of not just cross the aisle, cross school, nearly impossible, because each school has different rules. And so that's one of them. I was thinking of University of Oxford and Cambridge. They have the famous high table. They have colleges not organized by disciplines, as you know, but rather in each college they will have faculty representing different disciplines, and so naturally it creates kind of a community where people mingle over lunch and dinner, but also in the yards as you kind of stroll around. I find that this panel itself is so innovative, finally allowing us to have this dialogue. I was listening to all your insights and thinking a lot about one thing that interdisciplinarity brings actually is just contrarian, different ways to think about the same topic. Globalization, for example, generally shunned by humanists, by social scientists. It is something like they hear globalization, they hear colonialism, right? And economists sometimes do celebrate globalization. It's completely opposite. It's not something that's by default negative. And people understand localization differently. Race, for example, for the medical profession, sometimes it does matter in terms of DNA sequencing and predictive medicine, versus when we talk about racism as a social phenomenon. That's very different, right? Where people want to wish the division away, kind of there shouldn't be racial divisions anymore, but sometimes it is important. And so just this kind of eye-opening to hear a different, not just different knowledge, but different modes of thinking. Oh, you can think about this from this completely new angle, and if we combine forces, imagine we can go to the moon. But we wouldn't be able to do that with just one discipline or two.
I think a huge success for this symposium would be when the four of you submit a grant together. And I can totally see it happening, and we'll be there to support you. So we're celebrating academic excellence and impact. If I could just ask each of you for a last question, what does excellence and impact mean to you right now in your scholarship? What would that look like at this moment? Let's start with you, Mary, if you would.
Okay. We asked her what the questions were going to be in advance, and she refused to tell us. It was going pretty well up till now, I would say. Well, in my field, what we're really trying to do is end violence against women.
There you go.
And you can't do that without rigorous evidence. And the proposal I want to do with Chet is to understand whether, for example, violence is innate. That's a big conversation. We hear so many people say you can't prevent violence. It's part of our human nature. It's part of our DNA. It's caused by hormones. We have evidence now that shows that you can prevent violence, and a lot of it comes from the way we think about social norms, whether violence is appropriate or normative. And so I think those kinds of conversations elevate the conversation to a level of excellence that we are striving for, and the impact will be that we are continuing to change laws, that we've got violence against women is one of the Sustainable Development Goals. Now governments have to actually measure it and report on it. How do we do that? We need all of us to be able to do that well. So I would say, how'd I do?
You did great. You get an A.
That's all I got.
You got to think while she was answering.
Jump on
Yes.
this wagon, right? I'll add violence from stage and screen. And in the global literary history, there's a lot of violent tales. Violence is everywhere. From the very beginning, think of Homer. It's a story based on war. It's violence. So what is that kind of story? It's unpleasant stories. What does it tell? What does it say? If we were to go for a joint grant, that would be my little piece. Excellence in my field means a respect and understanding of words, especially in the era of artificial intelligence, where people increasingly think words don't matter. They do matter. Words, made flesh, as well as the metaphors we live by. Right? How we think about how we thought the world is organized around us. It's actually very often around metaphors. And people think about, for example, the current AI issue, very often human versus machine. when in reality it's really humans versus humans. It's the corporations and controlling the AI tools, for instance. That's kind of, so words do matter in that way because it wakes you up, it reframes your thinking, and you suddenly realize for all this time, things in front of your eyes, and you are not seeing it. Because not the right words, not the right metaphors, and we've all been duped.
All right, Chet, are you the
Hard
PI
acts
on
to
this
follow.
round?
Okay.
What's your proposal going to be?
Yeah, the rest of it.
Are we doing grant proposals right now? Right now, okay. So excellence to me would, in general, mean doing work that matters, that improves people's lives in some way. In my field, I think that means improving our understanding of humans' place in nature. And that can have all sorts of reverberating benefits, I think. It can give us a better perspective on our biology and how we're susceptible or vulnerable to certain medical disorders and diseases, and maybe think of better treatments. It can help to, if people understand our evolved biology and its roots, dispel some of these false notions of the innateness of things like violence, or to counter false narratives about racial differences. I think that these things can matter in research to improve people's lives.
I'll just add to that quickly. From an experience I had working on a project funded by LMI. LMI is in Northern Virginia by Tyson's. You're going to see it's a glass building, LMI, with a flame. They've got a red flame on top of the eye. They call it the flame of innovation. LMI gave us $50,000 to look at the problem of vaccine supply chain in least developed countries. I'm from a developing country, a least developed country, by the way. And I felt, oh, this is a question that goes close to home. So I went back to my country to collect data, did the analysis, very simple analysis, and what did we find? We said, hey, no country in Africa manufactures vaccines. All vaccines come from Europe. They come from other continents. Now, when they come into the country, they go to the capital city. From the capital city, they go to the regions. From the regions, they go to the states. And from the states to the local counties, and then to the health facilities. In a country where electricity is a luxury, much of those vaccines would have gone bad by the time they get to the hand of the kid that needs it. So what would we do? We analyzed the system, and we felt, let's eliminate this center location in the country. Let vaccines come from abroad to 3 locations, regional hubs, and from there continue the echelon. And guess what? That improved performance dramatically. Not only did Nigeria consider, that's the country in question, consider adopting our recommendations. They felt that, a project that was funded by $50,000, what could they have done? Then they went ahead and consulted with McKinsey, multi-millions of dollars. McKinsey came up with nice document, glossy papers, glossy prints, recommending exactly the same thing we told them. So again, to your question about what research excellence, for me, it's putting smiles on people's faces, saving that next life, ameliorating that challenge the individual is having. As you can see, my area of research as a systems engineer, anything is people ask me, what is systems engineering? I say, what do you want it to be? And that's exactly the answer, because a system is a collection of parts that are meant to work together for a particular purpose. And if we're talking about systems engineering, then we need all these pieces to come together to address the challenges. And for me, excellence is knowing that, by the way, if you're also talking about academic excellence, we published that work in Health Affairs. That's my first and last publication in that journal, the foremost journal for health policy in the United States. It's phenomenal. So for me, as I said, it's about addressing these issues, putting smiles on people's faces, and knowing that we have actually advanced, the horizon, the frontiers of knowledge. And again, there's no better place than here, GW. I'm breathing, and I have GW flowing in my blood.
I want to thank you all for that really exciting conversation and for the proposal prep. That was a very engaging conversation. I think we can all see the value of talking across disciplines. And that sustained conversation is what's going to drive innovation. I want you to know the Office of the Vice Provost for Research is here to support the GW community, ensuring we have more opportunities to do that, because that is how we raise higher together. So join me in thanking our panelists.
Great final word. Awesome.
And now I'm pleased to welcome President Granberg back to the stage.
Well, thank you so much to this amazing panel. When I blurted out this idea that I thought it would be wonderful to have faculty recognition as a signature part of the inauguration activities, I did not ever imagine that I would sit in a conversation where I laughed, I was deeply touched, I was deeply inspired, and I was so excited about the faculty here, the work they do, and what the possibilities are for the future. So I thank you all so very much for being here and for agreeing to do this. And I particularly want to thank Pam Norris, Chris Bracey, and Donna Arbide, who really put an enormous amount of work and thought into putting together what I think is really an ideal panel to showcase both the diversity and the depth of quality of the research that we have here at GW. Every day at GW, we change the world through world-class research, through education, through patient care. And that really is the engine of excellence at the university. So I'm so glad that we were able to start off with this. Everyone who attended here today is going to receive a commemorative champagne flute on your way out as a token of our appreciation. And now I'd like to invite you to join me in the lobby for some refreshments and some opportunity to visit not only with these amazing panelists, but also with other outstanding faculty who we invited to join us here today and who will be out as a part of the reception. So thank you again, and I look forward to seeing you in just a few minutes.